I'll start with the first question. Why should the voters elect you and not your opponent? If we can limit it to policy and approach, not really biography or recitation like that, but more on policy. How do you? Why should people consider a change if they want to and go with you?
Yeah. Well, Tom Tiffany is actually hurting people. His votes are hurting people. When you go through his voting record, I've met with so many people at fairs and farm events, especially the last month and a half. Most of these folks, it's rural, it's Republican. And what we find out is they don't know his voting record. When they find it out, they don't like it. He's voted against lowering the cost of insulin. He voted against the infant formula funding bill. He voted against aid for Ukraine. In a debate I watched of his 2 years ago, he's talking about how we have to expand broadband access, but he voted against the infrastructure bill, which was expanding rural broadband access and fixing our roads, and it also created a lot of jobs. He also wants to privatize Social Security. I have not run into one Republican or independent who believes privatizing Social Security is a good idea. And he also just recently voted against the PACT Act to help our veterans with the medical issues that they're facing from toxic burn pits, Agent Orange, radiation sickness from even going back to the Korean War, and a lot of these folks are dealing with exposure to tainted water at camps like Camp Lejeune and Pearl Harbor, and the list just goes on. He voted against the contraceptives bill. He doesn't believe people should have access to contraceptives. I thought that was over in the 60s. So, I mean, the list just goes on. If you look at his voting record, it's just he votes against everything. And I mean, my understanding is the legislator is supposed to be there to help people. He's also, when he's there, because he's also missed 350% more votes than the average congressperson. That's in the last term for which we have records, the 116th. He looks to be on track record for the same for this term. But, I mean, missing 350% more votes than your average congressperson. I want to show up. I want to help people. I grew up in this district. I've had a home and year on home here for 25 years. And again, where you have a representative that doesn't even step foot on any of the 5 bands of the Ojibwa Nation when they represent 2% of the constituency of the district, that's just disregarding a huge portion of your populace.
Assuming you win in November, would healthcare, or is there another single issue that you would prioritize in the coming 2-year term? I guess name your issue if you had to just pick one and describe what you would want to accomplish for the voters here in Northwest Wisconsin.
Yep, there's several. The one besides healthcare is Social Security. It can be fixed in one day. Most folks, another thing I hear from folks is they're very nervous. Those who don't receive Social Security, many don't believe it's going to be there for them. Many who have it are afraid whether it's going to continue to be there for them. And it literally can be solved in one day. Most folks don't know that when a person reaches currently $147,000 in earnings, they stop contributing to the Social Security Medicare fund. You just remove the cap on earnings, and Social Security and Medicare is solved immediately. Okay. That's all you need to do.
Moving toward healthcare a little bit, if we turn toward healthcare, how do you view what do you view as the government's obligation, if any, to help American workers secure health insurance? Do you support the creation of a continuation of a program such as Medicare for All or Obamacare? Do you have a different idea? And if you do support government-related insurance plans, how would you pay for it?
Yeah, well, I'm not exactly sure of the perfect solution, whether it's Medicaid for all. That might be the way to go. And the interesting part of Medicaid is that most folks think it's a Democratic idea, but it was actually introduced by Richard Nixon. And so, I'm not sure, there still could be private options if someone wants a particular type of policy, but I would hope that the public option, eliminates the need for someone to look beyond that. Employers would still contribute. healthcare costs are a huge part of an employer's costs. Maybe we can trim part of that, but the employers would still be contributing. And again, a big part of what you hope to get in savings is that if we're getting people annual physicals and they're getting into office visits and we're treating them right away, we're not getting into the expensive part of treating the diseases and the cancers and everything down the road. That's where the health system becomes so expensive. And also, the insurance companies are a huge part of the problem. I've been to silent auction events when you have, this was years ago, but I mean, it's even long ago when the CEO of like United Healthcare is making $100 million a year. Well, guess what? That's everybody's premiums. The insurance industry takes a huge bite and adds a tremendous amount of cost to our system. And if we just had an administrative system for taking care of the bills and such, I think we could make it all work. We've made Social Security work. We've made Medicare work. We can figure out how to make this work.
Now, if you win in November, who do you anticipate some of your allies to be in Congress come the start of the 2023 legislative session?
I don't know. I'm not a politics. I did not plan to run for public office in my life. That's not where I saw myself going. I mean, I like Dean Phillips from Minnesota. I think he carries a lot of the values of Wisconsin. It's really more of a center of the road. He might be called a Republicrat. Has ideals of both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. Most people fall in the middle. The biggest thing that I have learned in traveling all these miles, meeting with all these folks, the thing that they want more than anything is for the legislators to work together. They're tired of one party bashing the other and the other party bashing the other, and simply if it's their idea, it's no good and nothing happens. 45 years ago, I grew up in the Republican Party, and, everybody compromised. Everybody gave a little bit so that you move something positive forward, but you didn't always get everything that you wanted. And that's what people are really yearning for. They're looking for compromise. And Tom Tiffany is not into compromise. It's a scorched earth. It's mine or it's no way. And, it's even like right now there's I believe it's called the Pittman-Robertson Act. This has been around since 1937. I think it was during the Roosevelt era. And it's actually the firearm manufacturers asked for this legislation to be enacted. And a portion of the taxes go to conservancy, to hunter safety courses, things like that. And Tiffany's a sponsor of this bill. Being in the northern part of Wisconsin to want to revoke the firearms the conservancy groups and the outdoor groups do not agree with this. And even one of the other co-sponsors of it pulled out. I'm sure he realized this was a horrible idea. Not Tom, full steam ahead. And that's what supports a lot of our conservation and hunter safety courses and things like that. So it has to be relooked at.
What role, if any, do you feel the government, specifically, obviously Congress, plays in curbing the record inflation we've been experiencing? That's top of a lot of people's radar, and the plethora of the unfulfilled jobs that we've seen all over the state, but especially here in the rural northwest Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, we've been hit by three cataclysmic things that have led to inflation. Number one, we had a pandemic that we haven't experienced in 100 years, and the supply chains have been disrupted. People leading up to that, including all the supply chain disruptions, is what's happened with the workforce. You look at the number of people who left the workforce, and many haven't come back. And a lot of those are truck drivers and service workers who many of them may not feel comfortable going back. In fact, I have a friend who owns a restaurant in Merrill, and I asked him, because I got an autograph from Ray Nitschke. He actually opened up Chip's Burgers in Merrill. And the first day I was there, got a signature, and I remember where it was, and I asked him, so are you going to open this back up for tables and such? He goes, no. He has such solid business through drive-in, he's just going to keep it that way. And so these servers that used to make good money with tips and stuff like that, I think you've seen a lot of their incomes, their way of earning incomes go away. And And so, so you have the supply chain disruptions, you have the incredible disruption in our employment scenario, but you also have to keep in mind, right now, Wisconsin has the lowest unemployment rate it has ever experienced. It also has more people employed than it has ever experienced. So you got some real wild stuff going on right now. And then you add in the Ukraine war and the disruption of what that did to the fossil fuel producers and such. One of the Republican solutions was, well, that's why we need to open up the pipelines. You can ship all the oil you want down to New Orleans or Kansas, wherever. There's no refinery capacity. It's not going to solve anything. It doesn't matter how much oil you're pumping right now if you can't refine it into gasoline. Yeah. So, and with that, because so much, everything is tied to petroleum or fossil fuels. Outside of something being made out of cotton or silk, it's made out of petroleum. Everything you touch, everything around us is touched with petroleum. So that spiral in petroleum costs is now making everything else expensive because the basis for what it's made from is fossil fuels. But what really heartens me is, like, I have a daughter, she's in chemical engineering, and what she's working on is how do we now make things out of plants instead of fossil fuel? And that's the future. Not making things out of fossil fuel. It's how do we, algae has so much energy potential, and you can just grow huge fields of it off in the oceans and such, and the other types of vegetation we can create energy from and such. That's the future, not fossil fuels. And it's not like fossil fuels is going to go away tomorrow. But, and that also comes into, future green energy. Tom Tiffany wanted to take away subsidies for solar and wind power. Those are the types of energies we need to be investing in. Right now we're giving subsidies to fossil fuel companies that are experiencing the greatest profit at our expense that they've ever had in their history. And then you want to take away the subsidies from what the future is to leading to green energy. Wisconsin has the 18th greatest wind potential for wind power, has the 18th greatest potential for wind power in the United States. Yet how many windmills do you see around the state of Wisconsin? Where you've been traveling and where you worked, you go through Minnesota, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, you see wind farms all over the place. Not in Wisconsin. I saw, like, near New Richmond somewhere, I maybe saw 3 of them together, and around New Richmond actually seems to be the place for newer green energy. I've seen solar farms and stuff like that. I believe there are some more closer to West Dallas or down near the Milwaukee area, but we are so far behind in that, and that's also comes to manufacturing and new jobs, because you don't manufacture those huge turbine blades 3 states away. It's going to lead to new manufacturing within our state, and the jobs that come with upkeeping these wind farms and everything like that. And the future has to be green energy. Again, it's not fossil fuels.
And then Wisconsin has, if you look around and travel around, we have 1 million people. Just District 7 probably has of the 8 congressional districts, probably definitely a substantial, if not the most of the 8 congressional districts when it comes to retirees, receiving more than 1 million receiving Social Security benefits. There's been talk recently of, again, making changes to the program, including privatization or making it no longer a guaranteed benefit, but perhaps a negotiable budget item each year. We touched a little bit on Social Security, but specifically on the future of it or the privatization. What is your thoughts?
Privatization is a horrible idea. And ask any Republican on the street whether they think it's a good idea, and they'll tell you it's a horrible idea. Any independent, any Democrat. The only one that's kowtowing to special interests, because the only one that's going to benefit is Wall Street. Do you know how many people who, if they had access for managing their future security, would have thought, well, I can be a billionaire in Bitcoin? Well, guess where they'd be right now? They'd have no Social Security for their future. Most people are not equipped to be able to handle the decisions to make sure that they have those money around in the future. That's why it's called Social Security. It isn't, no matter how big of a mistake you make, there is always a safety net get there to make sure that you can put food on the table, a roof over your head. Privatizing it is a horrible idea, and all it does is benefit Wall Street. This was talked about years ago, and it was realized to be a horrible thing, and it still is a horrible thing.
Yeah. What concerns you about your opponent's stance on various issues being discussed in the campaign? I know you touched on that a little bit, but what are some of your, I guess if you had to pick one of them, is the biggest concern about your opponent's stances?
Well, voting against the PACT Act for our veterans. Our district has a lot of veterans. They're around the world. They're of every political stripe. After that passed, talking to Republican veterans in Polk County, they're upset. These are their brothers who they served with, and even those who did not see combat, they agreed to put themselves in harm's way for us, and to not provide them every possible tool to help them, especially when they're sick. And Tom Tiffany also voted against the Gold Star Education Act to help the families of our fallen soldiers with their educational needs. I mean, veterans, I am here for the veterans. My mom's brother cleared mines for Patton's tanks in World War II. Most of his friends didn't come back. He didn't complain about anything. He went and did his job. My dad was a clerk. He was missing his thumb, so he couldn't fight in World War II. So he was a Radar O'Reilly in World War II, and probably one of the worst typists in the Army. But I don't care. I've the stories of my father-in-law. He served in Korea. I had another uncle who served on a ship in the Pacific in World War II. These are the stories of the folks that I grew up with, and I have the utmost respect for people. And I have friends who went to college. They served in the armed forces for 20 years and then retired. We owe everything that we can to these people that have agreed to serve and defend our country. And Tom Tiffany doesn't have the decency to try and help these people with medical bills from the toxic burn pits in Afghanistan, Iraq. This also goes to Agent Orange in Vietnam. Again, it goes to the radiation sickness from people yet in Korea and the tainted water in camps around the country. So he voted against it. I don't even know how to express how I feel about that. Well, I do. I'm disgusted by it. And then, he also voted against lowering the cost of insulin. Thank goodness with the latest Inflation Reduction Act, at least folks on Medicare, Medicaid, I believe, they're going to be capped at $35, whether it's a dose or a month. I was in Forest County a few weeks ago, and then Florence County the week after. Both weekends I ran into someone that had an insulin pack on their side, and their insulin costs are more than $3,200 a month, and they pay a large chunk of it, and it eats up their money. To vote against lowering the cost of insulin when the rate of diabetes it's tremendous through our district, especially with the counties that have Native American populations. It seems like the diabetes rate is even greater. And so to vote against helping these people with this medical cost when people are actually cutting their doses because they can't afford the insulin in the first place, again, I'm offended.
Okay.
And I would hope that the citizens of the 7th District of Wisconsin would want someone who's actually trying to help them, because this is actually hurting them.
Mm-hmm. If you had to pick just two goals, narrow it down to two goals and two sentences,
that's gonna be hard for me.
if you had to pick just two of your goals that would benefit people here living in the 7th District, just two, what would those be?
Healthcare for all. We need to solve the healthcare crisis because 58% of all American debt is medical debt. And we need to ensure that the future generations aren't accumulating that same debt. Mm-hmm. And everybody needs access to quality health care. The other is Social Security. We can fix it again. Just simply get rid of the cap, and Social Security is solved tomorrow.
Okay. How important is it for if you are successful here in your bid and you're in office, how important is it for the United States and the United States Congress to provide aid to Ukraine during their conflict with Russia?
We need to continue to provide financial aid. I don't agree with sending troops there, but Tom Tiffany voted against aid for Ukraine. He voted against recognizing NATO for their efforts in the Ukraine crisis. He did vote to accept Sweden and Finland, I believe, or whichever the two new countries, into NATO. But he's voted against the aid for Ukraine. Mm-hmm. Again, you're not going to find Democrats, Republicans, Independents that agree with that. They'll go for those that are going to just toe the Republican line or the hardcore line. They're going to say, well, it's a corrupt country. Well, I have to say that President Zelensky is one of the most inspiring, and his wife, because she is not left. They are some of the most inspiring people that I could have ever imagined seeing in my lifetime. Mm-hmm. He could have left, and he didn't. And he rallied them around, and they are protecting democracy far beyond, because every other country that was a member, Putin said he wants to put back together the Soviet Union. That includes countries that are part of NATO. So if it doesn't stop with Ukraine, where does it stop? Mm-hmm. So, and again, Tiffany voted against all aid for Ukraine.
Okay. And what would you, my last question, a formal question here is, what would you tell the people here in the 7th District about your track record in accomplishing goals, specifically through bipartisanship?
Well, I've been a business person. And I've fortunately been at the top of the chain, so I can pretty much always get what I want. But that doesn't mean it's the right answer. I've been successful. I've been a successful publisher. I had a newspaper in Milwaukee. After 3 years, we won the Milwaukee Press Club Award for Best Feature Writing in the state of Wisconsin. We beat every newspaper in this state. My business publications won 2 Jesse H. Neal Awards. They're considered the Pulitzer Prize of the business-to-business press. To me, it's about the quality of what you do. And the publications I have published have always been about the quality. When you publish quality material, the readers will want to read it, and the advertisers will find you because they want those readers. But in order to I didn't write all those stories. I didn't do all that, but it's getting people together. And I find when you get people together in a room, you typically, the right idea, the right answer bubbles through. It's the same thing as, it's compromise. There's lots of different points of view in the room, and you're whittling it down to what's the best way to move what we want to get done forward. You just have to keep your eye on what the goal is. What do you want to accomplish? And then you move past the negativities or the different things that might compete in the room, because ultimately everyone's out to try and find how do you get this good thing done. So by being a very successful business person, I was a leading executive in one of the largest publishing companies in the world. And, my success was by being able to get people to work together and, establish your goals and work towards those goals. And, again, you do it by compromise and getting people to work together. And the government should be no different. Run it like a business. And also, we need to run it like a business, and that you can't continue to spend more money than what you take in. No business survives doing that. We need to get a rein on expenses and figure out how to get all this done, and how can we do this in a better way. And I don't have all the answers, but I haven't. As I've created new newspapers, I've turned a weekly into a daily newspaper. I didn't know how to do that, but I figured out how to do it. And you figure out what you want to get done, and you'll figure out the answers how to make it happen.
And is there anything else you would like to? Is there anything else you'd like to share with the readers of the Intercounty Leader and our digital online platform here? Open up the floor and whatever you'd like to. Anything else you'd like to share?
Yep, I'm a constituent of the 7th District. Again, born and raised in Merrill, so people understand where I came from. When I was 7, my dad passed away. My mom had 6 kids. No insurance, nothing, living in Merrill. So she baked bread. I delivered it around the neighborhood. She rented out my sister's bedroom to a student at the teacher's college. We got our food in white boxes. She took up a second job. She defined who I am today. You can sit around and complain about things, but make it happen. And I could have sat around. I just was launching 2 new media brands, and then I realized that Tom Tiffany was going to run unopposed, and I simply said to myself, "This can't happen. This is unacceptable." And so I set those aside to defeat Tom Tiffany. And I could sit around and complain about what he's doing, or I can do something about it. And I decided I'm going to do something about it based upon how I was raised and the values that were instilled upon me growing up in a small town, and by my mom, who didn't stop. She kept moving forward, and she raised 6 great kids.
Well, I appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely,
All
Robert.
right.